ناصر من محبوبنا مشمولة قد بردت حر العدا ظهر الخسوف وفيه نور والهدى خير لنا ولخيرنا.
God bless you, and your strength of your resolution is playing wonders. Something wrong with the chair? Change it, exchange. Bring a new chair. Right. All right now? Good, mashallah. Please.
So yesterday we reached to his comments on Hazur's answer. He would like to remind us again. تعليقك على إجابة حضرة أمير المؤمنين بالبارحة. لا الأخ الكريم. الأخ محمد.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وأصلي وأسلم على رسول الكريم صلى الله عليه وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين. أما بعد، بالبارحة إني فهمت من النشوز، كيف العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما. فهمت هذه الآية. كنت قبل استماعي لهذا الشرح الجديد ما كنت أعرف هكذا، ولكن الحمد لله فهمتها واقتنعت بهذا الشرح. ثم بعد ذلك فيها قراءة أخرى عندنا برواية ورش تسمى النشور، وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها وننشرها. النشوز فهمته والنشور لم أفهمه، فأنا أريد أن أفهم ما معنى النشور. جزاكم الله خيرا.
He said I was convinced yesterday when I heard Hazur's explanation, but I would like to understand and learn more about the word an-nushur, especially after I read the explanation about this word in Riwayat Wirsh.
You see, the word nushur is very indicative in this verse, and is playing a very important role, because nushuz is generally raising the people from the dead, and nushur is their redistribution all over the world. That is nashar. So we are talking of nashar here. Not only the dead will be raised, but they will be spread all over the world. And this is the meaning of nushur in that particular verse. Will you kindly read it?
So this is verse number 260 in Surah Al-Baqarah. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajim. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها قال أنى يحيي هذه الله بعد موتها فأماته الله 100 عام ثم بعثه قال كم لبثت قال لبثت يوما أو بعض يوم قال بل لبثت 100 عام فانظر إلى طعامك وشرابك لم يتسنى وانظر إلى حمارك ولنجعلك آية للناس وانظر إلى العظام كيف ننشزها ثم نكسوها لحما فلما تبين له قال أعلم أن الله على كل شيء قدير.
Nushur.
ننشزها.
The word nushur, nunshizuha is all right. Where is the word nushur? Elena.
He says that there is another qira'ah.
Oh, understand. But in this verse there is no nushur.
No, for this verse there is another qira'ah.
Another qira'ah.
Instead of nanshizuha, nanshuruha.
That's right. I understand. This is the point which you didn't get clear to me, perhaps. My answer is the same. In this verse, but I think I should better start speaking on this verse once again, because it's a very important verse, and the Quranic handling of the subject is so masterly. It's unbelievable how this subject could be handled with such perfection. The story is, there are in fact two stories. One story says that a prophet of God passed by a ruin of a city. The city was in ruins. And he looked at the ruins and said, "Oh Lord, how could you raise these dead alive again?" Now, one thing is very important. This is the story which goes commonly among the Muslim scholars. Up to this, it's all right. But the point is, where did it happen? Which township that was? And why did he raise the question, why will you raise these people alone? Well, all the dead are raised in the hereafter. And nushuz, as I said, initially means the raising of the people from the dead. So the question one should, bring to one's focus of attention is, why a prophet of God passing through a ruin while he had seen ruins before? There are ruins everywhere. Why should he particularly ask, how will you raise these people, if he meant the raising of the hereafter, the raising the dead in the hereafter? That was a normal procedure known to every prophet. And he could not have asked God, how will you raise these people particularly after death? But Allah has raised uncountable number of people from their dead state, and no prophet inquires about it. Every prophet believes in the hereafter. So that could not have been the question. This is the story which goes according to the medieval Muslim scholars. And their answer, because the question is wrongly understood, the answer is wrongly understood. But the Quran has settled, Quran has discussed the issue in a manner that the wrong attribution of the meaning cannot be possible in this verse. Now, going back to the first. A prophet goes by a dead township, ruin of a township, and raises the question, "Oh God, how will you raise them again?" My argument is, if he had not meant raising them here in this world, it would not mean anything. Or raising them dead, the second meaning is spiritually. That could only be the possibility of the question. Because how will you raise them again in this world, physically, could not have occurred to a prophet of God. Where had God made a promise that I'll specifically raise the dead of this township here on earth? So it's a question which has to be clearly understood. What was that prophet begged from Allah? If he begged from Allah, how would you raise these people again after death? He believed in every dead being revived in the after, in the world hereafter. Why should he ask this question particularly to these people? If he meant a physical revival, who had told him that they will be physically revived? And when did it happen and where did it happen? Why should he suddenly ask God, how will you raise these people physically alive, physically into a live people from their death, from their dead bodies? That question could not have occurred in the mind of the Prophet. But the mullahs take it as that. The second thing which I believe is, a prophet of God must have heard repeatedly from divine promises that a people who would meet a physical death here on earth will be ruined. As a people, they will be raised from their spiritual ruin, not from their physical ruin. although they are scattered, they are finished, there does not seem to be any hope attached to them. Yet God will raise them. If that promise had been made in the previous books, then a prophet can ask this question. You have made a promise that we will come to life again. And here is a township of Israelites which is so completely ruined that one simply cannot visualize a time when they will be raised again. That is, not physically, spiritually. And they will begin to rule the world once again. This could be the only question which must have stirred the mind of the prophet. That's one thing should be understood. Mullah said no, this was not the question. He passed through the township and said, "O God, how can you raise these dead people physically again in this world?" The answer was, Allah will make him die himself. What is an answer? Poor prophet is asking about the raising of dead people, how they will be raised. Allah said, all right, I'll cause you to die yourself. So die. And when he is awakened from that death, his own personal impression is they have lived only for one night or so. That means that the man is seeing a dream and he knows it. It is not a real death, because when he awakens and Allah asks him, how long have you tarried? He says, only a day or a night, no more than that. Allah confirms this. Says, you are right. Look at your food. Lam yatasanna. Look at your himar. It's the same thing. Now here the answer of God ends and a new reference begins from here. Because when the himar is mentioned for the first time here, it is not mentioned as a bones of himar, as a carcass of a himar. It is mentioned fully as himar. And along with food being lam yatasanna, this shows that himar is also in the correct state of thing. So the point is, what is being said afterwards? Allah says afterwards, of not the bones of himar, but bones of the people. Because here the verse comes to an end and then another answer begins, which is a response to the prayer of the Prophet of God. Allah tells him that we made you to sleep for 100 years, which means you saw the things which are going to happen in 100 years. The rise of Israelites would require 100 years. And from then on, their return to the Holy Land and the rebuilding of the Temple of Solomon and everything will begin. This is exactly what is supported by history. It was Azkil Nabi, the Prophet of Allah, who passed through this township. He inquired from Allah, you have promised us that we are going to rule the world, and the promises you made to us are not yet over. What do I see? These people are finished. Allah says, no. He caused him to sleep and see in that sleep events of 100 years which were to come. But when he wakes up, he knows that he has slept only for a night or so. God supports this, does not reject it. You're right, look at your food, look at your himar, they're all right. But you have seen events of the 100 years, and from here the verse speaks of the dead bones of the people, spiritually dead people. That is what I explained to him. And Nunshizuha, in this sense, is the revival that is spiritual revival. It is not a physical revival of the hereafter. It could not be, because God does not do that trick in the hereafter, that the bones suddenly begin to get flesh and everything. It's not at all supported by other verses of the Quran. وَنُنْشِزُهَا فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ نُنْشِزُهَا فِي مَا لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. We look at the verse. Allah says, I will raise the mankind, the people, on the hereafter in a form which they do not know. So how could this verse speak of the revival hereafter, of hereafter? And the revival here was never the question. Revival of a dead people was never a question, could not have been a question in the mind of any prophet by passing through. And then the history should support, if this is the meaning, that after 100 years a full township springs from death into a full-blown people. This never happened. So the mullahs will give a lie to this verse if they insist on this physical meaning. It can neither apply to this world nor can apply to that world, but spiritually.
وَنُنْشِيَكُمْ فِي مَا لَا
أنشأكم نحن قدرنا بينكم الموت وما نحن بمسبوقين على أن نبدل أمثالكم وننشئكم في ما لا تعلمون.
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الذي خلق الموت على وإليه النشور في سورة الملك. سورة الملك.
No, we are talking about
وإليه النشور.
We'll come to that later. Just a minute. I've shown you that this verse.
هو الذي جعلكم الأرض ذلولا فامشوا مناكبها وكلوا من رزقه وإليه النشور.
That's why I had to show. So the point I have made clear is that this verse here definitely does not speak of what will happen in the hereafter. It does not speak of the events here on this world physically, because no township has ever come to life like it is mentioned here if it is taken physically. Why should Allah break the first part of the verse into two parts? You can see your food is not destroyed. Now, if the food was not destroyed and the donkey was destroyed, what is the meaning of this? Is this how Allah raises the things? The food remains all right, but the live people are finished and decayed. Obviously, donkey there is a full-grown donkey. It's not a carcass of a donkey which is mentioned. After the verse, after this part, the people of Israel are mentioned. They will be brought back to their spiritual or political grandeur as they had lost. Now, in light of this, I read this verse again. Then you understand the points which I have made. وَإِذْ قَالَ إِبْرَاهِيمُ رَبِّ أَرِنِي كَيْفَ تُحْيِي الْمَوْتَى. No, that's a different verse. أو كالذي مر على قرية وهي خاوية على عروشها قال أنى يحيي هذه الله بعد موتها. How will Allah raise these people? Why did you think of that? So many ruins in the world. If there were no promise, he could not have raised the question. And the promise is only spiritual, we know that. In the Old Testament, there is a promise that people will be raised again. فَأَمَاتَهُ اللَّهُ مِئَةَ عَامٍ ثُمَّ بَعَثَهُ قَالَ كَمْ لَبِثْتَ. Here's the point which I'm making. قَالَ لَبِثْتُ يَوْمًا أَوْ بَعْضَ يَوْمٍ. قَالَ بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِئَةَ عَامٍ. Proof. بَلْ لَبِثْتَ مِئَةَ عَامٍ. Although you think you lived only for a day or a part thereof, you lived for a full 100, you slept full for full 100 years. And in dream it can happen. You can sleep for 100 years or 200 years as you like. فَانْظُرْ إِلَى طَعَامِكَ. But at the same time look at your food. وَشَرَابِكَ لَمْ يَتَسَنَّى. They have not gone wrong. Is that the answer to the question? The question was how the dead will be raised. And God says, you sleep for 100 years and your food does not go wrong. It's impossible, this is absurd. And then it also says, وَانْظُرْ إِلَى حِمَارِكَ. Also look at your himar. Full grown himar is mentioned like food. It could not have gone any change. Allah testifies to the fact that really you lived only for a day or less than a day. You slept only because in that time food cannot go wrong, and in that time himar remains al himar. Nothing goes wrong with them. But when God says, I made you to cause you to die for 100 years, here Allah makes it clear. I meant you have seen events of 100 years. I mean that your answer lies in this 100 years history. You will see the same people who will turn into bones. They will, as if they will rise from bones again. That is, spiritually they will be raised. And they will become a powerful nation. Here, Naksu halama falamma tabayyana lahu. This had to be understood. Tabayyana is not a fact which you see happening before your eyes. If he had seen bones turning into gaining flesh and rising from the dead, there is no question of tabayyana. Tabayyana means interpretation of dream. Then he realized what Allah means. Physically, he has slept only for a day. Spiritually, he has seen the events of 100 years. And through this comparison and contrast, he understood. Then, what he said, Alamu anna Allah ala kulli shayin qadir. Then he said, now I know Allah can do anything. Now, this is very clear, but the word nunshizuha is the question, word in question. What's the name, please, again?
No, Muhammad.
Muhammad.
Yeah.
Hafiz Muhammad?
No, Shatiha Muhammad.
Huh?
Shatiha Muhammad.
Sheikha
Muhammad.
Sheikh Muhammad. Sheikh Muhammad Sahib wants to know the difference between nunshis and another version of the same word, which is nunshur. Nanshuru. Yes. Now, nunshizo is normally understood to mean nunshio. Nashat and nashar, nunshis, are normally understood to replace each other. They mean the same thing. If God does nasha, that is nashat al-ukhra as well. Nashat can take place here in this world and in the hereafter. Nushuz can take place here and in the hereafter. Both have a meaning of a sudden rise into something different. But here, because nunshizo meant in fact the revival of Israel, and they spread all over the world. So another qira'at of this verse reminds you of that meaning, which is not nunshia, which is nanshuro. Nanshuro means we will spread them. And this is exactly true. After Hizqeel prayed to God when he passed through this desolate township of Israel, which Nebuchadnezzar had destroyed. It was his question which was raised. Then came Azra, another prophet of God, who rebuilt the whole township with the help of Cyrus, with the help of Cyrus from Syria. And from then on, the Israelites began to spread all over the world and occupy. This is nanshuro, replacing or indicating the true meaning of nunshuro. This is not just accidental. Hazrat Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam must have told the people that, look, it's another version here. And this is the meaning applied. Don't misunderstand the verse. I have said all this, yet the question remains, why did not God in the first place use the word nanshuro instead of nunshuro? Because nanshuro does not apply to the dead. And the question was revival of the dead. Nushur can take place afterwards. So this is the beauty of the Quranic expression. It uses the central word which has to be used in answer to that prayer. And once raised, then they will spread, which means that God is not talking of the hereafter. God is talking of this world. Understand? I'm sorry, but I know you can do it.
I'll try.
He has gained expertise on this, and he can.
I'll try today.
I'm amazed at how he can reconstruct everything. MashaAllah.
I'll try today.
You can be brief about the first part, if you like, because we have already discussed it, some of it yesterday.
Yeah.
But come to the point which I am trying to make.
Yes, sir. Understood. كان السؤال من الضيف الكريم حول القراءة المختلفة لهذه الآية من سورة البقرة. يقول أن في رواية ورش مثلا استعملت كلمة ننشرها، فسأل محاط أمير المؤمنين عن الفرق وعن المعنى العميق لهذه الآية، ففسر حضرته وقال أن النشوز هو إحياء الموتى من الناحية، خصوصا في هذه الآية من الناحية الروحانية، والنشور أو نشر هو كي ينتشر هؤلاء الأحياء الجدد في جميع أنحاء المعمورة. فيقول إلا بعد الأحياء. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين هذا النشر لا يحدث إلا بعد عملية الإحياء الروحانية هذه بطبيعة الحال. ثم فسر حضرة أمير المؤمنين من الناحية التاريخية أيضا كيف أن أحد أنبياء بني إسرائيل مر على أهم مكان لذلك القوم، ورأى ذلك النبي أن القوم من الناحية الروحانية كانوا في أسوأ حال، فاستغرب، وهذا هو المعنى الصحيح لخاوية على عروشها، أي أن أمورهم الروحانية كانت في الحضيض. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين لماذا نفهم هذه النقطة الهامة؟ نعم.
Physical meaning as well as روحاني meaning.
يصحح أنه حضرته ويقول
على عروشها actually had happened. So that reminded him a people who are so totally destroyed. How will they fulfill the promises which you have made? This is the meaning, please.
يوضح حضرته أكثر ويقول من الناحية المادية كانت هذه القرية فعلا خاوية على عروشها، ومن الناحية الروحانية كان السكان أو أهالي تلك القرية أيضا في أسوأ حال. فهذا
people of Israel.
نعم.
روحانية people of Israel.
نعم. كان بنو إسرائيل في تلك القرية أيضا على أسوأ حال. فهذا النبي الإسرائيلي لما مر بتلك القرية قد استغرب، لأن هنالك وعود كثيرة من الله سبحانه وتعالى أنه سيعطي الزعامة الدينية والروحانية لذلك القوم، فاستغرب ذلك النبي كيف سيحدث ذلك. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين: لماذا؟ لأنه في واقع الأمر نبي من أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى يعرف الأمور المسلم بها في تخطيط وسنة الله سبحانه وتعالى، ولا يتأثر فقط من الناحية المعمارية ومن الناحية المادية والحالة المنحطة التي كانت عليها تلك القرية، إذ أي نوع من الاستثمارات البسيطة يمكن أن تعيد مجد تلك القرية من الناحية المدنية فقط. ولكن أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى هم يؤكدون بالدرجة الأولى على الناحية الروحانية لأقوامهم، وهذا فعلا هو الذي شغل بال هذا النبي الإسرائيلي. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين بعد أن فسر هذه النقطة، ويقول أن أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى هم يرون بفراسة خاصة، بفراسة إيمانية من الله سبحانه وتعالى، ويفهمون ويبحثون في النبوءات الربانية العظيمة. فلذلك تساءل هذا النبي لما شاهد هذه القرية خاوية على عروشها، وكان يعرف من النبوءات أن هذا الشعب سيلعب دورا عظيما ودور هام في توحيد الله سبحانه وتعالى، فلذلك استغرب. فيقول حاطب المؤمنين: انظروا أن هذا الشخص وهذا النبي يسأل هذا السؤال من الله سبحانه وتعالى، ويخبرنا القرآن الكريم أن هذا النبي أيضا قد قيل عنه أنه هو الآخر قد غاب أو مات لمدة معينة، ولما سئل عن ذلك الموت ذلك الغياب قال: ربما كان يوم أو بعض يوم. وهكذا بعد هذه الإجابة يقول له الله سبحانه وتعالى: انظر أيضا إلى طعامك هو الآخر، يعني طعامك لم يتغير، وحمارك هو الآخر لم يتغير، وما الفائدة من ذلك؟ فيقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين: هذا السؤال الذي ألقاه هذا النبي، وانظروا إلى هذه الإجابة من الله سبحانه وتعالى، وما هي العلاقة بين الاثنين. هذا النبي يسأل عن الحالة الروحانية، كيف تتحقق وعود.
Allah could not tell the Prophet that time is working on you and you actually died. But the time was not working on the food, on sharab and on donkey. What sort of time that was? This was not working physically on food and on donkey, but it was working physically on the Prophet. So it is impossible. That is why Allah said it, that you are right. Your impression is right. That you slept only for a day or a part thereof. But when we talk of that you slept for 100 years, you did as far as the future prophecies and their fulfillment are concerned.
يفسر حاضر من وينه ويوضح أكثر ويقول أن انطباعات هذا النبي لما استيقظ بعد تلك الفترة المعينة كانت انطباعاته لليلة أو أكثر من ذلك، فالله سبحانه وتعالى أكد له فعلا أنت على التفكير الصحيح، ولكن ما رأيته في تلك الفترة المعينة هي مدة تاريخية تغطي 100 سنة مستقبلية، وماذا سيحدث في تاريخ بني إسرائيل في المستقبل. فيقول حاطب المؤمنين: هذه الآية في الحقيقة تتحدث عن الهيكل العظمي وهو الهيكل الروحاني لبني إسرائيل، وكيف أن الله سبحانه وتعالى سيكسوهم ذلك اللحم الروحاني كي يتقدموا وكي تتحقق فيهم نبوءات الله سبحانه وتعالى. ثم أكد في خلال حديثه حاطب المؤمنين أن الله سبحانه وتعالى علمنا في القرآن الكريم ثم وننشئكم فيما لا تعلمون، ويقول هذه النقطة الهامة يعرفها أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى، لذلك هم لا يسألون عن الطريقة التي سيحيي بها الله سبحانه وتعالى الناس في الآخرة، إذ هذه الأمور إيمانية وتيقنوا منها. فلذلك تصبح الموضوع هنا واضح أن النبي من أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى لن يتجرأ ويسأل هذا السؤال الذي يبدو تافها ولا قيمة له، ولكن هو كان يؤكد على ذلك الإحياء الروحاني وكيف تتحقق فيهم وعود ونبوءات الله سبحانه وتعالى. ويؤكد حضرة من المنير مرة أخرى: إذا الأكل لم يتغير والحمار هو الآخر لم يتغير، فما هي الحكمة من ذلك وما هو المنطق من ذلك وماذا أراد الله سبحانه وتعالى كي يفسر لذلك الشخص من ذلك الكشف العظيم. فيقول حضرته: انظروا كيف أن هذا الشخص يسأل هذا النبي يسأل الله سبحانه وتعالى كيف تحيي الأموات، أي الأموات الروحانيين، وخصوصا لما مر بتلك القرية ورآهم في أسوأ حال، والإجابة من الله سبحانه وتعالى يقول له انظر إلى طعامك لم يتغير، وانظر إلى حمارك هو الآخر لم يتغير. فهل هنالك نوع من المنطق في هذه الإجابة؟ ولكن الله سبحانه وتعالى أراد أن يفسر لهذا النبي أن الفترة الزمنية التي رأيت فيها هذا الكشف العظيم هي كانت فترة زمنية لم يتغير فيها لا الطعام ولا الحمار، أي من الناحية المادية كانت محدودة جدا، ربما لليلة أو أكثر وأقل من ذلك، ولكن من الناحية التاريخية ومن ناحية النبوءات غطت تلك الفترة تاريخ 100 سنة سيحدث في المستقبل لبني إسرائيل. فيقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين: فلذلك نجد في القرآن الكريم وفي هذه الآية بالتحديد فتبين له، أي أن هذا الموضوع أصبح واضحا له تماما وفهم كل تفاصيله. فلذلك كانت إجابة هذا النبي أن أعلم أن الله عفوا على كل شيء قدير. ثم يفسر حضرة أمير المؤمنين ويرجع مرة أخرى إلى السؤال، وخصوصا حول النقطة ننشرها وننشزها، ويقول بالنسبة للنشأة وللنشوز كلاهما لهما بعدان، فالنشأة هي الأخرى تحدث في الدنيا وفي الآخرة، وأيضا النشوز أيضا يحدث في الدنيا والآخرة. إذا هذا النبي بعد أن هذا النبي حزقيل بعد أن مر بهذه القرية وأراد أنه بالتحديد أن هنالك من ساعده في بناء هذه المدينة، ليس هو بالضبط ولكن بالنسبة في تاريخ بني إسرائيل هذه المدينة أعاد ببناؤها بمساعدة أحد الملوك من الشام واسمه سيروس على ما أظن، وهكذا يصبح الموضوع واضح، أي موضوع أن بني إسرائيل قد انتشروا، ولكن ذلك بعد عملية النشوز هذه. فيؤكد حضرة أمير المؤمنين ويقول أن ربما الرسول صلى الله عليه وآله وسلم قد فسر لصحابته أيضا تلفظا ثاني لهذه الكلمة أو معنى أو تفسيرا لهذه الكلمة، ولكن الكلمة المعروفة والمتداولة أكثر هي النشوز، ولذلك فيه حكمة، لأنه لا يستطيع قوم أن ينتشر قبل أن يتغير وتبعث فيه الحياة الروحانية من جديد، فبعد أن تبعث فيه تلك الحياة الروحانية من جديد بإمكانه أن يتقدم وينتشر.
Now, I mentioned that about 100 years after this, the rehabilitation of the Israelites' capital began, and the recollection of the Bible also began. And I mentioned that it was Ezra who ushered the new era of life in Israel. Now, I told Imam Sahib to find out what was the time distance between Iskil and this Ezra. This is 100 years. History proves it. The time between Hezkel and Ezra is exactly 100 years, or a few plus and minus, but it is one century. And it was Ezra who began not only the revival of Israel as such, but he is the one who collected all the Bible which was completely destroyed. All of the Bible, by collecting various scholars from different tribes and inquiring from them, criticizing them, telling them what you remember of the Bible you have lost completely. And then he recollected it. That is the reason why some people, some scholars believe that Bible was revealed once again to Ezra. This is 100 years which the Quran is speaking, and how beautifully it fits into this historical situation.
يوضح حضرة أمير المؤمنين ويقول الآن تحصلت على المرجع التاريخي، وهو أن هذا النبي الذي رأى هذا الكشف المذكور في القرآن الكريم قد وجد بعده النبي الآخر من بني إسرائيل واسمه أزرا، والفاصل التاريخي بينهما كان ما يقارب على 100 سنة. فلذلك أيضا نرى أن التاريخ يؤيد القرآن الكريم، يؤيد هذه الآية بالتحديد. وأيضا نرى أن هذا النبي أزرا قد جمع الكتاب المقدس من الصحف الموجودة في ذلك الوقت، وأيضا من علماء بني إسرائيل في ذلك الوقت. لذلك نجد أن كثير من العلماء منهم من قال أن أزرا هذا وكأن الكتاب المقدس قد أوحى له مرة أخرى من جديد.
This I must say about Mr. Sheikh Muhammad. Perhaps many people don't know him. I met him for the first time in Paris, and I found him to be a scholar of profound knowledge of Islam. He is not an ordinary man. And I was afraid about him that perhaps he will be the most difficult man to handle during our question answer. And he turned out to be the easiest person because he was God-fearing. He raised the question which was very threatening. And when I answered, he started nodding and he said, "You are right. I think another reason why you are right is this." And he quoted from hadith, from the Quran. And I was amazed how profound his knowledge of Islam was. And now you have seen once again here. MashaAllah, Allah bless him. And may he go a long way towards spreading the message of Ahmadiyyah to all the other Muslims.
يقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين انتهت هذه الفرصة كي أعرفكم بالأخ شيخ محمد. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين أنني قابلته لأول مرة في عاصمة فرنسا باريس، وكان قد حضر هنالك لمجلس الأسئلة والأجوبة. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين من أول سؤال ألقاه علي ظننت أنني ستكون لي صعوبة من نوع ما لإقناعه، ولكن بعد أن أستمع لإجاباته قد غير رأيه وقد أقر على ذلك وقال فعلا قد فهمت وقد اقتنعت بإجابة حضرة أمير المؤمنين. وأيضا أيد إجابة حضرته ببعض الأحاديث ببعض الآيات القرآنية الكريمة. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين ندعو له إن شاء الله كي يوفقه الله سبحانه وتعالى كي يواصل هذه المسيرة في خدمة الإسلام إن شاء الله.
This should be true alim. Not like other ulama.
ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين أن هنالك ميزة وخاصية في هذا الأخ الكريم، أن فيه حب لله سبحانه وتعالى وفيه ذلك الحب للتطلع على الحقيقة ولا يخاف من لومة لائم.
يخشى الله من عباده العلماء. When these two things go together, then they are ulama, not otherwise. Next.
عندك تعليق آخر؟
Any newcomers? Any questions?
أخ تفضل خلوا الفرصة.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. أريد أن أوجه سؤال إلى حضرة مولانا أمير المؤمنين. ما هو رأي حضرته بالنسبة لقصة الاستنساخ التي سمعنا عنها في الغرب وخاصة في بريطانيا في المدة الأخيرة؟ وشكرا.
استنساخ. Cloning. Yes. Cloning. Yes. Hazur, he wants to know Hazur's point of view about cloning.
On cloning, I have answered this question many times before and in great detail. Briefly, this is interference with the creation of God and the system which He has created. And it is an interference in so many ways that it may destroy mankind ultimately. And the scientists are already raising this question seriously. And there are cases pending in the courts against the government that cloning must be stopped legally. So I don't want to go into the detail of this question. Cloning is possible, but it is created by God in a manner that the preservation of the life character should be guaranteed. That is the reason why cloning has become possible. Every cell in human body bears the entire character of the person to which it belongs. So to guarantee that whatever the person does is in accordance with the plan of God, God has filled this plan in every cell. Now scientists have started stealing that cell from the body and reproducing it, not artificially in the sense, but by following nature, by planting it into mother's ovaries and by taking it away from there and to plant it in another ovary or something. The result is that whatever is produced is exactly the same person whose cell is taken by the scientist. So an image of you can be created through cloning. And if you go on cloning yourself, you can turn yourself into 100,000 people. Exactly the same shape, exactly the same mind, but not the same spirit, not the same will. Because human children develop according to environments, according to the philosophies they hold, according to many other factors. So it is wrong to say that they will be exactly your replica. There could be among them who may have gone mad, who may like to kill their father. So anything can happen to the people which are produced through cloning. But I think for the time being, let's finish this subject, because otherwise it will occupy the next 1 hour or so, because I have so much to say about the cloning and the way they do it.
أجاب حضرة أمير المؤمنين وقال أن عملية الاستنساخ هذه في الحقيقة فيها تدخل في النظام الذي وضعه الله سبحانه وتعالى لهذا الكون وللطبيعة بصفة عامة، وإذا واصل الإنسان التدخل في هذا النظام الرباني العظيم فحتما سيؤدي به ذلك إلى هلاكه. ويقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين هنالك أصوات مختلفة من جهات مختلفة من دول مختلفة في أنحاء العالم تنادي بإيقاف عملية الاستنساخ هذه، لأنهم أحسوا بتلك الخطورة، بحدة هذه الخطورة على النوع البشري. ويفسر حضرته ويقول أن في جسم الإنسان نجد أن كل خلية في جسم الإنسان تحتوي على جميع الخصائص من الناحية المادية لكل إنسان، فلذلك نجد أن هؤلاء العلماء قد سرقوا هذه الخلية من شخص معين في عملية الاستنساخ هذه، ووضعوها في رحم امرأة، وتحكموا في تلك الخلية كي يكون المولود الجديد نسخة مطابقة للأصل من صاحب تلك الخلية. فهكذا يستطيع ذلك الإنسان أن يعيش لمدة معينة ويتواصل نوعه، يعني تلك النسخ المطابقة منه لمدة معينة، ولكن ستختلف تفكير المولود الجديد وتختلف روح وميولات ذلك المولود الجديد، وربما ذلك الابن سيكره أباه لدرجة ما ويؤدي به ذلك الكره حتى إلى قتل والده ذلك. فما هي النتيجة الأخيرة من عملية الاستنساخ هذه؟ يقول حاتم بن المؤمنين قد أجبت على هذا السؤال بالتفصيل في حلقات في الماضي، ولا أريد أن أخوض فيها مرة أخرى، وأرجو أن يكون هذا المقدار كافيا للجميع.
They are not the creators. This is what's the wrong impression. They cannot create a single cell of anything. It's impossible. They steal from Allah and plant it in a manner that Allah has not designed. That's the tadakhul fil khalq, not being khaliq.
يقول حاتم بن المؤمنين أن هؤلاء العلماء لا يستطيعون أن يخلقوا هذه الخلية، ولكن هم يسرقون تلك الخلية من خلق الله سبحانه وتعالى. فنجد أن خلاصة كلام حضرته أنهم ليس فيهم تلك القدرة لخلق هذه الخلايا، ولكن هنالك فيهم إمكانية للتدخل في عملية خلق الله سبحانه وتعالى.
Question? Yes.
أسأل مولانا الخليفة نصر الله على الآية رقم 10 من سورة 7: ولقد آتينا داود منا فضلا يا جبال أوبي معه والطير وألنا له الحديد أن اعمل سابغات وقدر في السرد واعملوا صالحا إني بما تعملون بصير. ولسليمان الريح غدوها شهر ورواحها شهر وأسلنا له عين القطر من الجن من يعمل بين يديه بإذن ربه ومن يزغ منهم عن أمرنا نزغه من عذاب السعير. ما المقصود بالجبال والطير وهذه الأشياء؟
Al-Jibal is used in the Holy Quran in the sense of great people, and there's many examples of this. Jibal can refer to a very powerful nation. In Surah Taha, those jibal which we turn into desert and sand particles, they are the great worldly powers. But I don't want to go into the discussion at any detail. Here the word jibal applies to the people of jibal. And jibal people are also referred to as jinn sometimes. But the jibal people are more tough and fit for hardy works. So we know that the people who are referred to were chained. According to the Holy Quran, they were chained in iron chains and things and moved in large numbers to their working places. If they were jinns of some sort, they could not have been chained by iron chains. They could not be fettered. So all I'm talking of jinn together with jibal to indicate that the Holy Quran is speaking of metaphors. Jibal can be great powers. And Hazrat Dawood and Hazrat Sulaiman had conquered all the great powers up to the end of Babylon. They had complete command of a country which Israel had never seen before and could not see again after them. So it is the great people of great nations who were subdued by Hazrat Dawood and Hazrat Sulaiman, which are being referred to as Jibal. And Tuyur are those spiritually revived people who, prior to the work of God's word upon them, like Jesus Christ made Tuyur out of earth, they are those Tuyur which are spiritually alive and they can fly heavenly heights. So the Holy Quran goes on speaking in the same symbolic language. And this symbolic language can be understood with reference to their movements from one place to another and their fast moving winds. If you had given me time, I could explain each word with the help of the dictionary as well as with the help of history, as we find unfold itself during Hazrat Dawood and Hazrat Sulaiman's time. The question arises, why did God use all this terminology? Because this terminology was used in the Bible as well, and which was used in common tales as well. And there was no indication that God meant spiritual things, and they had taken these things physically. So Allah implies the same terminology, but a few keys are put here and there, so that the wise among the people can begin to unfold its meaning and decipher it like other prophets' history and what happened to them. So this is the key to that understanding, and I can give one example of how Allah refers to the same tales but in a meaning, in a way that they have to be understood spiritually. When Allah speaks of Hazrat Sulaiman's end, He speaks of his asa being the sign that he was all right. And that asa, apparently by the people, is understood to have been put in a position where Hazrat Sulaiman is as if leaning on that asa. And the jinn working in the factories, etc., look at that asa and Hazrat Sulaiman leaning on it and think that he is still alive. And this is how the affairs of the government ran. And for a long time, as if each morning the same crowd of jinns passed through the same streets, looking up at the castle, and Hazrat Sulaiman was always leaning on that asa. And these ulama believe that he was a dead man at the same time. He was dead and leaning on the asa. What sort of insult they hurl upon the Prophet of God? The corpse of the Prophet is put to lean on a asa so that the jinn should not rebel. How long could that asa work? How long could the corpse of a Prophet was so insulted? Because Allah does not permit people to insult their prophets and their bodies. When they die, they are buried. But ulama think this is what it meant. Now, why this asa being repeated in the Quran? Why, when the jinn realized that this asa was eaten up, they rebelled? This asa here refers to the power symbol of Hazrat Sulaiman, the symbol of his government. As long as the symbol of his government was sound and strong, the rebellious people from the mountains, who were jinns, they could not dare rebel against Hazrat Sulaiman. But when the symbol of this government was moth-eaten or worm-eaten, and people could see it's no longer the same asa, then they started rebellions against the government of Hazrat Sulaiman. So this is why the same asa is repeated in the Quran, but in a manner that it could not be misinterpreted. It was his own son who was responsible for the rebellion of the jinn. When he, after his death, occupied the seat of power, asa became his symbol. And as long as it was his father's inheritance, it created that respect and awe among the people. But when they realized this man is not worthy of anything, he is only occupying a seat of power, which power is gone from under his feet. It was then that the rebellions began, and King Solomon's entire empire began to crumble down bit by bit and bit by bit. After his son, no empire was left. It was broken into pieces and things. So I am telling you all this, I am developing this to indicate that the Holy Quran has a very special style of using certain words which God had already used previously, which were misunderstood, which were turned into tales. The Quran repeats the same story by using those pivotal words, but in a manner, in a situation where they become self-explanatory. So why the jinn, tuyur, and all these stories about the throne and things, all appear in the Quran because God had used these symbols before, but they were misunderstood. Got it?
يقول حضرة أمير المؤمنين كإجابة لسؤال الأستاذ طه القزق، يقول حضرته أن هنا الله سبحانه وتعالى استعمل لغة مجازية عظيمة، وهي إلى أن الجبال هنا تشير إلى تلك الأقوام الجبلية العظيمة، ولذلك أيضا نجد أن في القرآن الكريم ذكر في سورة طه هذا النوع من هذا المصطلح.
Not only people of Jibal, but great powers as
نعم،
such.
ويقول حضرته أولئك الأقوام أيضا التي فيهم تلك الطبيعة الجبلية وتلك الخشونة أيضا. ويقول حضرته بالنسبة للجن هي أيضا لأولئك الناس التي فيهم تلك الطبيعة النارية وتلك الطبيعة الخشنة. فلذلك يقول حضرة من المؤمنين إذا رأينا أنه في وقت حضرة سليمان عليه السلام وضع هؤلاء الجن في سلاسل من حديد، ولكن الحديد لم يذوب بالرغم من أن هذا الجن قد لمس وقد وضع وغلل في تلك السلاسل الحديدية. إذن هنا الموضوع يصبح واضحا للجميع، وهو أن المصطلحات التي استعملها الله سبحانه وتعالى هي بالدرجة الأولى مصطلحات مجازية. فيقول حضرته نجد أنه خصوصا في عهد حضرة داود وحضرة سليمان عليهما السلام قد توسع ملكهما، وحتى وصلوا إلى تلك الجبال العالية وتلك الأقوام العظيمة التي كانت معروفة بتلك الطبيعة الخشنة، وأيضا بتلك الطبيعة الثورية والموصوفة هنا بالجن. ويقول حضرة من المؤمنين الطيور هنا تفسر ذلك أولئك الأشخاص الصلحاء الذين يحلقون في العالم الروحانية. فإذا يقول حاتم بن المؤمنين بعد أن فسر بعجالة هذه المصطلحات المجازية المذكورة في هذه الآية، يقول حضرته لماذا استعمل الله سبحانه وتعالى هذه المصطلحات؟ ويجيب على هذا السؤال ويقول قد نجد أن الله سبحانه وتعالى قد استعمل نفس أو معظم هذه المصطلحات في الكتاب المقدس، ولكن اليهود قد أساءوا فهمها، فأعاد الله سبحانه وتعالى مرة أخرى في القرآن الكريم هذه المصطلحات، وأضاف أيضا كلمات أخرى كي تكون مفاتيح لأهل الفراسة ولكي يفهموا هذه المواضيع التي لم تفهمها بني إسرائيل في قرون مضت. فإذا هنا ليؤيد حضرة من المؤمنين كلامه قد فسر لنا كيف وقعت نهاية حضرة سليمان عليه السلام، إذ نجد أنه في بعض التفاسير كان متكئا على عصاه، وذلك وهو قد توفي وغادر الحياة الدنيا. والحكمة من ذلك حسب كثير من هذه التفاسير لكي يخاف الجن ولا يثوروا على ملك حضرة سليمان عليه السلام. ولكن يفسر حاتم المؤمنين ويقول في الحقيقة في هذه العملية إهانة لنبي من أنبياء الله سبحانه وتعالى، وكيف أن يبقى جسم ذلك النبي وهو قد توفي لمدة طويلة، وما هي الفائدة؟ فسيأتي يوم ويسقط ذلك الجسم وسيثور الجن عليه. فإذا ما هي الحكمة؟ يقول حضرته في الحقيقة القرآن الكريم أراد أن يفسر لنا من الناحية المجازية أن عصا حضرة سليمان تمثل حكومته، أي تكون كشعار لحكومة حضرة سليمان عليه السلام. فإذا لما تلك العصا تغيرت قد ثار عليه الجن أو ثارت على ملكه تلك الأهالي من الحدود الشمالية لمملكة حضرة سليمان عليه السلام، أولئك الذين فيهم تلك الطبيعة النارية، وبتغير العصا أي بتغير الملك لشخص آخر. ونجد في التاريخ أن ابن حضرة سليمان قد تمسك بالحكم خلف والده، فلذلك قد أحس كثير من القبائل الذين كانوا تحت ملك حضرة سليمان أن هذا الشخص وهذا الملك الجديد ليس فيه تلك الكفاءة التي كانت في والده، وليست له شخصية قوية، فلذلك ثاروا عليه. فتغير العصا هنا بالحقيقة يمثل تغير الحاكم أو تغير السلطان.
You see, الشياطين and jinn both were subdued by Hazrat Sulaiman and Hazrat Daud, right? What sort of shayateen and jinn they were? They were made out of fire, if they are real jinns of the people's mind. Were they not? If they are jinns, which mullahs think they are, then they have to be made out of fire. How can you arrest fire in asfad? وآخرين مقرنين في الأصفاد. Can you arrest fire in asfad? It's impossible. The fire will melt the iron or anything if it is bound in asfad and will be released. So Allah Ta'ala speaks again of the same things in the same terms, but in a manner that every sensible man should understand what is meant. They are people. They are not things made of a different substance. And the history tells us, you can see the pictures in the history of pharaohs and other great people, where people are chained and moved from one place to another to serve, to achieve great laborious tasks. And sometimes more than 100,000 slaves were bound in asfad to be carried to their work and then back. So the Quran is a beautiful book. It doesn't leave any room for doubt.
يؤكد حضرة أمير المؤمنين ويقول أن هنا بعض العلماء يفهمون أن الشياطين والجن قد رزقوا لحضرة سليمان كي يختموه، فيقول حضرته كيف بإمكان النار أن توضع في هذه الأصفاد وهذه الأغلال، إذ النار هذه ستذيب هذه الأصفاد. فإذا يقول حضرته أن التاريخ أيضا يؤيد ما يقوله القرآن الكريم، ويخبرنا مثلا في عهد الفراعنة وغيرهم وكيف أنهم وضعوا السلاسل والأغلال في كثير من الناس للقيام بكثير من الأعمال الشاقة.
The pyramids were made by these jinns. Really?
يقول حضرته أن الأهرام قد بنيت عن طريق هؤلاء الجن. شكرا على حسن المتابعة، والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.